Today, we journey back to the glittering salons and shadowy courtrooms of late Victorian England to meet a man whose dazzling wit lit up the stage and whose defiance of convention shook the foundations of society. This is the story of Oscar Wilde, playwright, poet, provocateur, a man who rose to the heights of fame and charm, only to fall victim to the prejudice of his time. Oscar Wilde remains one of the most iconic figures of his era, celebrated for his sharp humor, brilliant plays, and razor-edge social criticism. He captured the imagination of Victorian society with his charm, intelligence, and unflinching honesty, becoming a symbol of wit and rebellion. But Wilde's life was not without tragedy. In a world hostile to his sexuality, he faced public humiliation, a scandalous trial, and imprisonment. For decades, his name was synonymous with disgrace and intrigue. Yet history has a way of rediscovering greatness. Today, Wilde is remembered with admiration and affection, not just for his unforgettable works, but for his courage to live authentically in a time that demanded conformity. And, of course, his wit still sparkles across the decades. As he once quipped, "To get back my youth, I would do anything in the world except take exercise, get up early, or be respectable." So stay with us as we step into the extraordinary life of Oscar Wilde, the genius who dared to laugh at society even as it turned its back on him. Oscar Fingal O'Flaherty Wills Wilde was born on 16 October 1854 in Dublin, Ireland, into a well-known and rather extravagant family. His father, Sir William Wilde, was a renowned physician, knighted for his contributions to medicine. The Wilde household was a lively one, and their lifestyle often fueled Dublin gossip. From an early age, Wilde showed remarkable intellect. He earned a scholarship to Trinity College Dublin, where he immersed himself in the classics and developed a love for Greek philosophy and its celebration of beauty and individuality. His academic brilliance won him another scholarship, this time to Magdalen College, Oxford. At Oxford, Wilde came into his own. He cultivated his poetic sensibilities, his love for literature, and his unique, flamboyant style, which drew mockery from some of his more conventional peers. His bisexuality also began to shape his sense of self, adding another layer of defiance to his character. Though brilliant, Wilde was also rebellious. At one point, he was suspended for arriving at Oxford 3 weeks late for term. Eventually, he abandoned an academic path and moved to London, where he would become nothing short of a sensation. In London, Wilde mastered the art of self-publicity. He became one of society's earliest celebrities, as famous for being famous as he was for his sharp wit and conversation. His clothes, his manner, his quips all became fodder for satirical cartoons and gossip columns. Yet Wilde relished the attention, but his meteoric rise would soon meet a tragic fall. On 18 February 1895, the Marquess of Queensberry, the man who gave boxing its famous rules, left a card at Wilde's club accusing him of sodomy. Outraged, Wilde sued Queensberry for libel. But the trial turned against him when Queensberry's lawyer unearthed evidence of Wilde's relationships with young men. The libel case collapsed, leaving Wilde bankrupt and vulnerable to criminal charges. Soon after, he was arrested and tried under the Criminal Law Amendment Act, which made homosexual acts illegal in Britain. The sensational trial gripped the nation. Wilde defended himself with his characteristic wit and poise, but the evidence was overwhelming. He was convicted and sentenced to 2 years of hard labor, a devastating blow to both his health and spirit. Prison broke something in Wilde. Though he was eventually released, he left England for Paris and lived the rest of his life in relative obscurity. Yet, even in his final years, he never completely lost his sharp intellect or his poetic touch. From this period came one of his most haunting works, The Ballad of Reading Gaol, which reflected his deep empathy for his fellow prisoners. I never saw a man who looked with such a wistful eye upon that little tint of blue, which prisoners call the sky. Though he never returned to the heights of his earlier fame, Wilde remained, as one biographer put it, beaten but not bowed, still a clown behind a mask of tragedy. Oscar Wilde's life was a whirlwind of brilliance and contradiction, saint and sinner, rebel and dandy, victim and provocateur. As much as he is remembered for his plays, poems, and essays, he is equally remembered for the audacity with which he lived. As Wilde himself said, "I have put my talent into writing, my genius I have saved for living." And his words continue to remind us of life's paradoxes, its hidden truths, and its absurdities. As his biographer Richard Ellman wrote, Wilde challenged the very idea of good and evil, showing that morality was far more complex than Victorian society cared to admit. Perhaps his greatest triumph remains his art, especially The Importance of Being Earnest, a comedy that remains as sharp and delightful today as it was in Wilde's time. Through its wit, Wilde reminded us of the foolishness of convention and the joy of living authentically. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't got the remotest knowledge of how to live, nor the smallest instinct about when to die. That was the story of Oscar Wilde, the man who lived and wrote with unmatched brilliance, leaving behind words that still make us laugh, think, and feel. As we close our journey through the extraordinary life of Oscar Wilde, it's impossible not to marvel at the brilliance he left behind, not just in his works, but in the way he saw the world. Through his plays, Wilde revealed the hypocrisies and absurdities of Victorian society with sharp humor and disarming charm. Though never an overt political activist, his pen became a subtle weapon unmasking the ridiculousness of rigid social norms and exposing the pretensions of the so-called respectable. Take these immortal lines from The Importance of Being Earnest. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the very highest birth who have, of their own free choice, remained 35 for years. Lady Bracknell, Act 3, or Algernon's quip in Act 1. I am so clever that sometimes I don't understand a single word of what I am saying. Lines like these still make us laugh and think because Wilde understood human folly so profoundly. He showed us the humor in our contradictions, the absurdity in our seriousness, and the tragedy in our cruelty. Wilde himself lived at the mercy of society's shifting judgments, once celebrated, then condemned, and now, more than a century later, rightly remembered as one of the greatest wits and most original thinkers of his age. As Stephen Fry wrote of Wilde, "What of Wilde the man? He stood for art. He stood for nothing less all his life. He is still enormously underestimated as an artist and a thinker. Wilde was a great writer and a great man. And so he remains a man who lived life fully, whose genius for words never dimmed, whose wit endures as a mirror held up to our own vanities and virtues. Oscar Wilde, the man who made the world laugh even as he bore its cruelty, and who taught us all that life, like art, should never be taken entirely seriously.